Welcome to A2Council Update, a recap of the Ann Arbor City Council meeting on January 21st, 2025. This meeting included comments and discussion about amending the standards for scoring bids on city contracts, negotiating with the district library to transfer an urban park named in the city charter, and issuing capital improvement bonds for a new fire station at Huron Parkway. This is the voting chart for the council meeting on January 21st, 2025. All agenda items were approved unanimously. Councilmember Aisha Ghazi Edwin from Ward 3 was absent. This was her 12th absence since taking office in November 2022. You can find detailed information about this meeting at A2Council.com. Like and subscribe if you would like to see more content like this. The meeting included an update from Maura Thompson, Executive Director of the Downtown Development Authority. She discussed plans for a team of downtown service employees that would manage cleanliness and maintenance.
We are looking at this as clearly a service team. And just to provide some examples of the type of things this team would be responsible for: sidewalk sweeping and curbside cleaning, weeding, and trash removal. I just want to point out, say, the picture in the middle. That's a tree pit. We have many tree pits downtown that look just like that. And when you have weeds growing like that, it communicates kind of a lack of attention that we don't want. And I wish I had pictures of all of these things because they're equally as important, but I do want to call them out. So snow removal and ice melt application at sidewalk ramps, bus stops, ADA parking spaces, and benches. Bikeway delineator maintenance and replacement, that right now is a function of the city. We think, and city staff agrees, it makes more sense for that to come under the umbrella of the DDA through this service team. So now that we are working on this development plan, it seems like a natural time to look at the areas that are adjacent to our boundaries and evaluate, do those areas need investment? So really for us, the question is there a need beyond our current boundary for the type of investment that the DDA makes in our downtown?
After introductory remarks, public comments, and staff explanations, Council discussed agenda items for less than 20 minutes. 16 people signed up in advance to offer public comments. 13 people spoke to topics on the agenda. The consent agenda this week included 5 items and expenditures of less than $700,000. Nothing was pulled for discussion. All items were approved unanimously. Council considered amendments to the city ordinance that describes the requirements for bidding on city contracts. Since 2022, bids on city contracts have been scored under a best value standard, rather than awarding contracts to the lowest responsible bidder. Under this standard, companies submit hundreds of pages of bidding materials, which are then assessed and scored by a committee of city staff. Since 2020, council members Redina and Iyer have 3 times successfully led efforts to overrule staff scoring of these bids in order to award millions of dollars in contracts to their own favored companies.
It's not simply we're picking one versus the other. We're just picking a replacement.
When we deem it necessary and appropriate, council ultimately has the power to accept and reject bids.
This is a normal part of the process that just doesn't get used very often at all.
I move to amend that resolution CA1 to approve the construction contract for Huron West Park sanitary sewer replacement phases 2 and 3, to change the contractor from Paymar Enterprises Inc. to Major Contracting Group Inc.
This week's proposed amendments, sponsored by Redina and Iyer, will eliminate paperwork, allowing bidders to share information via their company websites. Amendments will also eliminate the category of sustainable materials and practices, because typically there are no alternative sustainable options for city construction projects. In discussion, Councilmember Iyer explained,
This one I'm really excited about because this is finally going to allow us to score bidders on things that we value, like whether they pay prevailing wage on projects all the time, not just city projects.
This detail is not in the ordinance amendment or in the staff summary of proposed changes. Hours before the meeting, a new scoring rubric was added to the agenda late. The amended rubric adds clarification of how points are distributed within a score, but does not include the change described by Councilmember Iyer. The ordinance amendments were approved unanimously at first reading. At a future meeting, they will be the subject of a public hearing and final approval at second reading. Without discussion, Council unanimously approved a resolution authorizing settlement of litigation with 201 North 4th LLC by sale of part of a city alley. Council considered a resolution directing the city administrator to engage in exploratory conversations with the Ann Arbor District Library about development of the property adjacent to the downtown library. This parcel was the subject of a city charter amendment approved by voters in 2018. That amendment directed the development of a civic commons and urban park under city ownership called Center of the City. A nonprofit 501c3 supports the planning and development of the property at Center of the City. Volunteers have organized events, planted gardens, and installed murals there. By spring of 2023, over $70,000 had been raised toward the development of a park similar to what exists in places like Royal Oak and Detroit, and similar to what is currently being planned in places like Saline and Chelsea. The city has ignored requests for a memorandum of understanding that would accelerate private fundraising for Center of the City. In November 2024, the director of the Ann Arbor District Library hosted a public meeting and presented a plan for rezoning and expansion of the downtown library. When asked specifically about collaborating with efforts at Center of the City or making use of the property, he said this.
The library doesn't typically make plans for other people's property. We're not in control of that, and the charter language doesn't seem to allow that sort of usage. So I think those are two significant issues. At this point, we're focused on this property that we're in control of and seeking the rezoning of that site.
6 weeks later, the Ann Arbor City Administrator reported to City Council that he had been approached by the library about pursuing a transaction of the property at Center of the City. He emphasized that their interest was in earnest. This week's resolution points to a lack of funding as evidence that the city charter amendment should be revisited. Earlier in the evening, public commenters spoke to the issue.
Average residents have long given up the idea of a Center of the City park being anything more than a parking lot, and it's time to move on to create something really cool downtown.
I request that the proposed resolution be amended, though, to include the Library Green Conservancy in discussions with the city and the AADL regarding the use of the Center of the City, so that the public has a seat at the table and a voice in the discussions.
I'm speaking as president of the Library Green Conservancy, a 501c3 nonprofit organization comprised of Ann Arbor community volunteers. Since 2018, the Library Green Conservancy has raised private funds to support establishing the Center of the City as a place that will invigorate Ann Arbor, that will be the welcoming urban place of interest, entertainment, and community engagement for Ann Arbor's future. In 2018, 26,752 voters expressed their support for establishing the Center of the City. That charter amendment referendum wasn't just another public opinion poll that you can take or leave. We pledged $70,000 to match the $40,000 that council allocated in 2021. The DC2 resolution criticizes the adequacy of fundraising for the Center of the City, although no one representing the city has asked for discussions about funds. We know, as you do, that our fundraising efforts are constrained by the lack of an MOU, an agreement that will signal to donors and grantors that the city is committed to implementing the Center of the City. Please amend DC2 to include the Library Green Conservancy as an active, interested group in the discussions between the city administrator and representatives of the Ann Arbor District Library and other groups on the topic of the Center of the City as designated in the City Charter, Chapter 1, Section 1.4.
I support DC2 because acting on this resolution will move Ann Arbor toward actually creating a community commons in Ann Arbor's downtown that will be successful and vibrant.
You know, the library is an institution that could not just get this done, but really they could deliver something that would be a true crown jewel for our community.
For those who sincerely want a civic commons downtown, this project is a win. Any private development that co-occurs will generate additional tax revenue from two extremely prime parcels that currently generate none at all.
I would love to see the Ann Arbor Public Library expand onto the footprint of the library lot to enable additional useful space for programming.
I'm looking forward to the promise of an urban plaza and park on the library lot as promised by the passage of Proposal A in 2018. The PROS plan from the 2020 census showed that the central area of the city is the least served by parks, with only 4.11 acres per 1,000 residents compared to the city average of 17.96 for the rest of the city. I'm a librarian. The challenge is to create a new library yet preserve the public space and garden that the voters have voted for and were promised. This consideration comes at a time of great promise with the opportunity to apply for a Michigan Futures Grant.
This resolution is highlighting the failure of the city to uphold the city charter.
This prime location deserves a tall building with housing,
seconds.
active ground floor, a splash pad, and a library that can be a center of civic life for generations to come.
I believe the district library's leadership and the city administrator, along with their respective staffs, should be given the space to work on this without interference, without obstruction, without anybody else involved.
Redevelop a new library, include housing that's super, and include what our charter calls for by working with the city to, in the charter language, it does mention the word develop. The citizens did vote for this. It is in our charter. There was a whole system set up. The Library Green Conservancy, it'd be wonderful to end the divisiveness by including the Library Green Conservancy as you move forward.
Council discussed it for less than 15 minutes.
It could truly transform that part of downtown, and that's exciting. At a public input session in November, the library presented a wide-ranging vision for the expansion of this downtown branch. It included the potential to add spaces for nonprofits, performing and visual art space, potential for co-working space, housing.
This is inherently something that is us exploring an opportunity to be able to act and deliver on what voters called for in 2018, and to understand what another community partner might be able to help us be able to facilitate and bring that forward.
Having served on the library board, I guess now I'm the only council member now that can say that, I can speak firsthand to its excellence. This is a nationally acclaimed institution that has earned multiple awards, and more importantly, the deep trust of our community through its many consistently innovative approaches to public service and public space.
We haven't seen the private funding develop to really put that plan into action. And as a result, we've heard a lot of frustration from folks who have been advocates of this space for a lack of action to develop this into a civic commons.
The roof of the underground parking structure on 5th has been a dead zone for decades. We need activity in our downtown. We need housing for people who work in Ann Arbor. We need a new library to better serve the public, and we need programmable open space.
The resolution was approved unanimously. Council briefly discussed the issuance of up to $12 million in capital improvement bonds to replace a fire station at Huron Parkway.
This is exciting. It would be the city's first carbon neutral public facility. When Chief Kennedy came and presented this plan to the Planning Commission, it was so exciting. But what he had to say to dampen our excitement was, there's no money. And this is a way of getting money, so thank you.
The resolution was approved unanimously. The meeting adjourned at 8:40 p.m. without any further public comment. For more details about this meeting, visit A2Council.com.
Welcome to this week's A2Council Moment of Zen.
I think there's a lot to learn, but I don't think that this is a time for us to do anything but to celebrate the good work that's happening at the local level.